Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm Faith. I'm going to be moderating this panel. Everyone is very cool and is bringing lots of talent to the stage. I'm excited for you all to hear from them. To start, I want to kind of go down the line, starting here with Mary, and have each of you introduce yourself, your company, what you do, and just tell us briefly about what your experience is with improving the talent pipeline, what that means to you. Mary?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Burke, and I am the SVP and Head of HR for Experian Consumer Services. ECS is the consumer side of Experian. Most of you associate Experian as a credit bureau, but if you've heard of products like Experian Boost, Experian Go, it comes from this business, which is now the largest business at Experian. In the last 2 years, we have grown significantly and have really great ideas I'd love to share with all of you on improving our talent pipeline.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Ptak, and I work for the NYU Tandon School of Engineering. It's so weird hearing yourself on a mic. Sorry, very jarring. And I'm here because as an engineering school, we have really kind of a dual responsibility for equipping the 21st century workforce, and that's to make sure that we're cultivating the right skills, but also to make sure that we're creating new pathways for historically underrepresented communities in STEM.
Good morning, everybody. I'm jealous of everyone wearing a coat right now. My name's Adam Gefkovicz. So I grew up in this old motorhome, traveling around the Pacific Northwest selling women's clothes. Door to door, boutique to boutique. It's kind of a funky little world to grow up in, but I ended up being the first person in my family to go to college. And probably like many people in this room, you get to college and you just see that everyone seems to have some rich uncle or colleague or coach that can help them get an intro for their first job. And I didn't have that, and I really wanted to get an awesome first job. So I basically became just enamored with this space and interned everywhere. Ad sales, tech companies, finance groups, and it all culminated in getting this big internship at LinkedIn. And I was really excited, moved up to San Francisco. LinkedIn's mission is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. But when I was there, I saw that there was so much more that could still be done on the platform, specifically to support early in career talent and underrepresented talent. And so I started Untapped about 5 years ago to really be that next generation of LinkedIn. And since we've raised over $70 million and built an incredible team of about 50 folks, 2 of which are here today, and partner with companies like Lyft, JP Morgan, Dropbox, Comcast, you name it, on our mission to make the world more equitable. So yeah, thank you for having me today, and I'm excited to chat through talent pipeline stuff.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Brown, and I am the General Manager of the Personnel Department for the City of Los Angeles. For me, I grew up in the City of Los Angeles as an employee with 35 years on the job. And improving the talent pool to me, or for the City of Los Angeles, is about making sure that Angelenos all have access to employment. I'm not sure if you guys saw our new boss, our new mayor, Karen Bass. Absolutely. And during her inaugural speech, she spoke very directly to Los Angeles, saying that Los Angeles has a job for you. So what we are looking to do is improving our talent pipeline by inviting the very diverse community of Los Angeles to come and work for us. And I started as a clerk when I was in college, and so the City of Los Angeles has a complete career path from clerk to general manager for anybody who's interested.
It's hard to follow that. I'm Kelly McCulloch. I'm the Global Chief People Officer for Taco Bell. Also more widely known at other organizations as the Chief Human Resources Officer. So I oversee HR for Taco Bell globally, as well as equity, inclusion, belonging, and transformation. And to answer your question, Faith, just around talent, I view my role as I got to set the example for how we think about this, and I got to push our thinking, which means I got to push my own thinking pretty regularly.
Love that. Yeah, as you can see, we have a really broad and diverse talent base here when we're talking about improving the talent pipeline. And like Steve said, we want to talk about it from end to end. So if you don't mind, I want to start with kind of the back end, how we first identify where there even are gaps in the talent pipeline. So when you're looking at potential employees, how do you identify the gaps in your company or industry that you're not meeting yet, and how do you target them? Also, how can you tell where the gaps are? Like, what are the populations that aren't making it? And Dana, I remember from our talking earlier, you have some interesting insight on this, so I'm going to start with you.
Yes, thank you. So I am the only civil servant on the panel, and one of the beauties of civil service is that the community is happy to tell you where the gaps lie. And so the city of Los Angeles has certainly risen to the occasion, and we have a number of programs in place, particularly to focus on the underserved communities in Los Angeles. We have a program called Targeted Local Hire, for example, where we bring individuals in and train them on the job rather than to subject them to traditional civil service examining and testing and that sort of thing. Because what we have found is that as DEI has become more and more at the forefront of what we do, we have noticed that civil service does not necessarily is not married or even dates DEI. In fact, one might argue that it's actually counterproductive. And so we have put into place a number of programs like TLH that does not send people through the testing process as it traditionally has been, weeding through candidates. Instead, we bring them in, we train them, and then we evaluate them on their performance rather than on their performance before they start to work. And so, excuse me, TLH is certainly one of the lower level job pools. We only use them in entry level jobs, and we are also looking at some of our more skilled jobs to also incorporate that same sort of non-civil service examination process mentality there. And so again, we know when we're not doing things right because everybody in this room, as well as everybody out there, certainly tells us, and we appreciate and value that commentary. So.
Yeah, that's a great response. And obviously, as you said, I mean, you started as a clerk and now you're the general manager of this department, and the civil servant pipeline has served you. Kelly, I'm curious your answer to that. How do you identify gaps in what populations? How do you determine those populations?
Yeah, so we have an interesting setup. Taco Bell is almost 8,000 restaurants, mostly here in the U.S. Restaurant teams around 250,000 people. We work with over 200 franchisees. So some of these employees sit in our corporate office in Irvine, just down the road. Some of them obviously are out in our restaurants. Some of those restaurants are equity owned, meaning we own them, about 500 or so. The rest are franchised. Everything outside the US is franchised. And so it creates this interesting dynamic where you have to think about a lot of different kinds of populations, right? From a franchisee perspective, it's all about educating them, sharing best practices. Those are their employees. They are responsible for that experience. And so it's more so about making sure you've got the right partner there. On the corporate side, in the office in Irvine, in our equity restaurants, I joined Taco Bell in January of 2020, longstanding Yum employee, been around forever. But when I got there, I joined, and 12 weeks later was when everything shut down. Pretty quickly realized a couple of things. One, an area where we were woefully underrepresented was our digital capabilities, just in general, right? So the way that we think about it at Taco Bell is strategy, structure, culture. What are we trying to achieve? Do we have the right structure in place for that? Do we have those capabilities on the team? Do we need to build those out further? Do we need to go hire people to close those gaps? So those kinds of things I think are pretty obvious, right, as the business is trying to adjust to what's happening in the environment around it. I think where we've made some meaningful progress in terms of understanding where we lack representation, right? First, you got to get your arms around the data, which, believe it or not, can be really hard. If it's not something that your company has prioritized, HRIS, right? It's not. Historically, we prioritize customer data, not HR. We always joke that we're the cobbler's children. We have no shoes. And that's showing now, right? So we've pushed really hard to get our arms around the data. We've benchmarked different talent pools around the country, so speaking specifically to the US. So something that's rather interesting that the pandemic helped us with, believe it or not, was getting our head around remote working. Orange County, Irvine, California, not the most diverse place. It's just not. How in the world are we going to get the kind of representation in our corporate office, that we need? Historically, asking somebody to drive down from LA 5 days a week, who wants to do that? Not many people. Now, with more flexible working schedules, we can have people work remotely, whether it's LA, Chicago, Atlanta, DC, and we're figuring out how to do it and do it successfully. So that's how we've approached it.
Very cool. Yeah, I like what you said about the data there. And Adam, I know that in some of your work with Untapped, obviously you're looking at different populations and you're keeping an eye to underrepresented groups and identifying them. What is your kind of response to that, and how do you incorporate data like Kelly was saying?
Well, one thing I already really like about this event, just from the first hour and a half here, is there's a bunch of different industries and sectors. We have schools, we have consumer brands, we have civil service. For us, we work predominantly with tech and finance. So most of the lens through which I'll be speaking is based on tech and finance companies. With this question, there's really, I think, 2 steps. The first is, number 1, can you identify the composition of your pipeline? And then number 2, can you figure out where there's discrepancy and ultimately improve those? And I think everyone likes to pretend that they're on step 2, but most companies that we talk to are still on step 1. When we go talk with very prominent tech companies or very prominent finance companies, and we ask them, what percentage of your recruiting pipeline do you have accurate diversity data on? Typically, it's around 20 to 25% EEOC completion, whether that's from the ATS or another tool. And we see like the best of the best companies that have spent millions of dollars on customizing their ATS or customizing certain workflows, getting closer to 60 or 70%. And so that's one of the core problems that Untapped helped solve from the outset. So a company can go from getting 20% visibility on the diversity of their pipeline to closer to 95% visibility. And then, and only then, can you start addressing some of the gaps. So I'll share a story about Lyft. So Lyft has been one of our flagship customers for, 4 years now. They've made 1,000 hires through Untapped. They had this big software engineering internship role. And for these types of roles, they get 20,000 inbound applicants at least.
Wow.
And so what they were seeing was a disproportionate amount of Black and Latinx candidates were not passing the technical phone screen. So what they did is they created a virtual event on Untapped. They invited all their candidates. They invited their CTO and the hiring manager. And he actually did a session called How to Ace the Technical Phone Screen. And so after that, they saw a huge uptick in the amount of candidates that are passing through these. And so I guess it's just to say that broadly talking about the composition of your talent pipeline and diversity, it's a subject that no one wants to be behind on. No one wants to admit, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be here, but this is where I'm at. But for me, as someone who's talked to 1,000 of some of the best companies in the world about this, most companies are still on that first stage. And I think it's okay to spend some time to really get that right, so you can feel confident with the data that you're working with, and then really, really address it seriously.
So we've been hearing a bit about how you're targeting certain populations. I'm also curious, when you're thinking about hiring and bringing people in, how are you also making sure you're not leaving anyone out, even as you are trying to be more inclusive and target certain populations? And for this question, I'll start on this end. Mary, do you want to go first?
Yes. So to Adam's point, we come from different industries, and Experian is not as big as Taco Bell. We are about 22,000 globally. We're about 6,000 in North America, and we're headquartered in Orange County in Costa Mesa. We are a big data company, so most of our jobs are, software engineers, data analytics, technology, IT infrastructure, marketing, and more professional level roles. And so we have the ability to invest in really good HRIS systems. And we actually have a platform where we use the AI to screen our job description to make sure that it has inclusive language. In addition to that, we've created a very robust website, experian.com/diversity, where it actively invites all candidates to take a look at all our diversity programs to learn more about our commitment in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a special benefits brochure specific to inclusive benefits that talks about our adoption policies, our reproductive benefits for the LGBTQ community. We talk about our, we offer 10 days of bereavement leave for chosen families. And so that allows really more inclusion, into our pipeline. And what I think is a simple thing that anyone can do here is making sure that your interview slate is diverse. Because you'll find in engineering, for example, you'll have a full all-male candidate interview slate, and inadvertently that does create bias in how you select candidates. And so feel free to invite somebody that's not in that functional org and be part of the interview slate, and you'll find that the inclusive thinking around your employees as well as the selection process, does open up. So those are some of the things that we do to make sure we are accessible, and the biggest part is we are very flexible, and so we don't require anybody to come to the office. We go where the talent is, and that does open up accessibility, especially as we try to hire more people with disabilities. And so lots of great ideas, and we're continuing to strive for more ideas on how to create accessibility to Experian.
Yeah, that's a lot of great ideas there. And you mentioned a couple keywords that I want to hear Lauren's take on: artificial intelligence and implicit bias. I know that's right up your alley.
Yes, I know it's not the popular opinion to talk about the downsides of tech, sitting in between people who are just talking about the upsides of tech, but I'm sorry for that. I think technology is such a blessing for so many of us, and particularly in HR when you're dealing with 20,000 candidates who are applying to jobs. You need to incorporate technology into the hiring process. But one of the things that some of the researchers at Tandon have been looking at in our Center for Responsible AI is hiring technology, because it's one of the fastest growing sectors for applying machine learning. And one of the things that they're finding in this research is that a lot of these algorithms are being trained using data sets, historical data sets, that have reflected biases. So I apologize in advance to anyone in this room named Jared, but I'm going to use this example. So if you train an AI algorithm, right, on historical data, and your organization has historically promoted people named Jared who are white men who graduated from Northeast colleges, for example, and they have been promoted faster than other people, the algorithm is trained to seek out that pattern, and then all of a sudden in all of these 20,000 candidates, all of the Jareds who are white men from Northeast colleges get suddenly prioritized above other candidates. And so there's these biases that can be built into these algorithms, and those of us on the front line of HR are not always aware that that's what's happening. And so you are automatically screening people out from your applicant pool without realizing that that's happening. And so just think having everybody be aware that that's an issue, interrogating some of the technology about how it's been trained, how it works, so that you can prevent that from happening. And we actually consulted with the City of New York on a law that's going into effect on January 1st, 2023, where employers cannot employ technology that does not go through annual bias audits to determine where that might be happening. And they also have to disclose to candidates when that technology is being used, so that the public can start to be educated to ask those questions. And we can take kind of a closer look at how these systems are working that should be making our lives easier, but hopefully are not making other people's lives harder unintentionally.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is something that is a big priority for us at Untapped. And so we do fall in the mold of, your typical venture-backed tech company in the HR space, but we've actually taken a very anti-AI stance. And so, over the last 5 years, learned a lot about this space, but something that really surprised me, and maybe most folks are aware of, but might surprise some of you all today, is basically any tool that claims to offer some sort of pipeline composition tool or diversity pipeline composition tool uses one of 10 add-ons that exist out there that infers diversity data based on surname analysis or visual identification. And so basically, you can look it up right now. It's like diversitydata.io. That's one of them. And so you can plug it into a set of names or a set of social profiles, and it will infer what someone's background is. And tools are doing that for everyone today. My co-CEO, Tarek Myers, who was previously the global head of diversity and inclusion at Coinbase and at Lyft, he's an African-American gay man, and he always jokes that they think he's Jewish. We've kind of interviewed most of our candidates, which are typically Gen Z folks below the age of 24, wanting to work in tech. And yeah, no one wants this. No one wants this, and I'm very excited for that new legislation that's passing in 2023, particularly just making folks aware, like, hey, this tool that you're applying through is going to infer your race and gender and many other things. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting example. So we've been talking obviously a lot about hiring, but also part of the talent pipeline involves retention, employee retention, how an employee is ushered up through the ranks of a company or an industry and made to feel like they have a place there. So I'm curious what a strong example is that you've seen of a company, could be yours, could be another one, how they recognized and made way for talent internally. That could be through mentorship or apprenticeship programs, or you all are the experts. Kelly, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I mean, the talent pipeline at the restaurant level is hugely important to us, right? Most of our restaurant general managers started out as a team member or a shift lead in the restaurant. And so what we try to do is and credit to those who came before me. Like I said, I've been at Taco Bell since January of 2020. And so I'm just trying to build, we're trying to build on what was already put in place, which was a pretty significant employee experience. We talk a lot about people first, and they were delivering. So we've just tried to build on that. And I'll give one quick example on the team member side, and then one thing we're doing more broadly across the corporate office and including the restaurants. On the team member side, when we had our 60th birthday celebration earlier this year, Taco Bell turned 60 years young, we decided to honor the team member. And so we partnered with Born and Raised to create a one-of-a-kind uniform t-shirt for them. And we told them not to sell it on eBay, but I think they did, because it's pretty cool. And so, kind of how do we continue to think about how do we instill pride in our team members? They want to wear those shirts. They want people to know they work for Taco Bell. We talk about the cultural rebel is kind of who we speak to as a consumer. Well, guess what? The team member is the cultural rebel. So it's nice to have that marketing message and team member message tied. More broadly speaking, just across the corporate office, and then we've just started including the restaurants as well. In 2020, when I got there, my boss, our CEO, said to me, hey, we have to make this organization more inclusive, right? He is all about innovation. We call it restless creativity. And to be honest with you, the innovation was kind of owned by the cool kids in marketing. And if your idea didn't come from marketing, please go sit down. We don't need to hear from you. Go do your number thing or whatever it is you do. And it was so demoralizing to people because they want to help and they want to be a part of something bigger. And they're like, but I have an idea. So we created something called Internal Incubator, and we ran it virtually last year. We did our first live session this year. And quickly what it is we partnered with a former Disney Imagineer to come in and do some training on how to get to the big ideas. So we didn't just say, hey guys, here's a business problem, help us solve it. We actually gave them some training that can go into their development plan. It'll help them in whatever their day job is. And then they actually get in these teams and they try to solve a big business challenge. So the one we put forward was, how do we make working at Taco Bell the best job in QSR? It may have been an expletive in there because it's Taco Bell, but for this audience, I'll take it out. And so they came up with these incredible ideas. They went to a hotel in Huntington Beach and worked with this Imagineer, and then that culminated into a Shark Tank style kind of pitch your ideas. There were 4 ideas that came forward. We brought judges in from the outside, again, who have credibility in the community and could ask some really great questions. And we came up with an idea that has to do with giving team members more time off, and it makes our executives sweat, which means it's the right idea. So it's pretty cool. And people just feel like they're a part of something bigger and helping to solve a big challenge. So that experience and feeling included is hugely important.
And it just sounds like fun.
It is.
I mean, Imagineer, yeah. Bringing a Disney Imagineer in Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Dana, what about you? What are some ways that you've done this kind of retention process?
Yes, so as they say, diversity is inviting someone to the party and inclusion is asking them to dance. And so with that said, the city of Los Angeles definitely believes in that philosophy. And so we actually have on my staff what we call a city employee engagement officer. And part of her job is to engage employees to find out kind of how they feel about things. We do a lot of employee outreach, a lot of surveys and sessions where employees are telling us if they want to dance and or how they want to dance. and sometimes it's I want to dance, but I don't know how to dance. Mm-hmm. And so we do a lot of employee engagement in that way, just sort of reaching out to them. The city we put together our employee engagement officer, worked with the council president's office, and we had our very first cohort of a women's leadership academy this year, where each city department selected a member at a particular administrative level with a certain number of years on the job. You know, they had some requirements, but each department selected one female employee to participate in an 8-week training program where various members of the city's executive staff provided training in things like leadership, supervision, labor relations, governance, city governance, all of these things that would help them be more competitive as they move forward. And so they actually graduated from that first cohort, graduated in July of this year, and it was just a beautiful experience. And these women were all like so very grateful, you know, for the opportunity. And I joked with them and said, I wish somebody had told me I had to go out and make friends and learn how to dance on my own. But I don't want that for you all. And so we did that. And another thing that we rely very heavily on is partnerships with particularly our labor partners. The city of Los Angeles is rich with labor partners. And so before I became the general manager of personnel, I used to be the chief negotiator on our labor contracts. And so I try to leverage those relationships that I built over those years to help labor, to partner with me. Tell me about your membership. Tell me what motivates your membership. You meet with them regularly. They tell you their grievances. They tell you when they're happy. They tell you everything. And so we have used those relationships to also fashion programs that are beneficial to the employees in Los Angeles, so that those who want to dance can.
The whole time you were talking, in the back of my head, it was just the song, I won't dance, don't ask me. No, but I love this example too of the Women's Leadership Program, because that's such a good way of kind of marrying what we were talking about earlier with like identifying a pool of people that may not historically have made it in the same way that other people do, but also doing the retention. I attended one of those in my industry this year, and it was super impactful, and like you said, it kind of made explicit all these things that are kind of implicit about a workplace and how to rise the ranks. Mary, I wanted to hear from you on this question also. I know you talked in the prep call a little bit about some cool programs happening at Experian.
Yes. So, at Experian, with regards to what we call talent mobility, we also leverage DEI metrics to make decisions around where to focus. So we have embedded diversity in how we promote. We look at promotion rates on women and underrepresented communities. Survey results, we break down, sentiment by each underrepresented community. Making sure all our leadership programs have diverse representation. So it's become very much rigorous in how we look at diversity across all phases of the employment life cycle. And what we found throughout the metrics is that our most diverse population are entry level and come from our call center environment. So if you've ever had to dispute something on your credit report, and if you call, we have a nearly 1,800 call center organization where it is our most diverse population. And guess what? They know our products really well because they answer calls. And we have built development programs towards our most diverse pools across the organization, so that rather than sourcing externally, we actively bring up diverse pools of talent within our organization, whether that's through a rotation program, an accelerator program. We really invest in those programs, but we do internships, we do MBA rotation programs, we have a thriving mentorship program, women and men. We have a tool that matches mentors to mentees. We have training for mentors and mentees, and so that is very much an active part of what we do. And I think what I would recommend, if any of the organizations here have employee resource groups, you'll find that the data around diversity, equity, inclusion, when shared with the employee resource groups, they will actively build programs to make sure that everybody gets brought along. Like, for example, living in Orange County, we have a thriving Asian American population. We have high supply of talent. But as we look at representation at varying levels of the organization, it does tap out at the lead level, and it slowly, narrows in terms of number the higher up in the organization. And we use that information on creating management programs towards that population and partner with our Asian American ERG group to really drive more development in that area. And so it doesn't have to be HR's job. There's actually a lot of passion around this, around the orgs, and really our employee resource groups have come through for us.
Great. So a lot of what we've been talking about here obviously comes back to HR and personnel, but you can't do this work alone of improving the talent pipeline. So I'm curious who you have found to be a successful ambassador or partner in this kind of work. And Lauren, why don't we start with you with this question?
Thank you. That's a perfect segue. I think you mentioned the word partners, and all of you sound like you've got really good systems in place for training and reskilling, and I think identifying certain populations within your organizations and seeing maybe labor gaps in other areas. And I think a lot of organizations see the same thing but can't necessarily figure out how to get the people from group A to the jobs in group B, because the gap is an education gap, and most organizations are not education companies. They're not designed to kind of help figure out how to effectively reskill. And so I think that's something that Tandon is really focused on, is partnering with corporate partners to figure out how do you effectively adapt some of the educational qualities of a higher ed curriculum and actually apply that to a corporate organization. And we actually recently partnered with the MTA in New York to help them look at their IT worker population, both union and non-union workers, and figure out how to equip them with some skills in operational technology security that were needed by adapting a master's level curriculum into 2 8-week programs. So making it more digestible, more achievable for workers to do on their own time, to get continuing education credits. So kind of pairing that instructional design expertise from higher ed with the corporate environment. And I think that's something where there's a lot of room to innovate and kind of bring those areas of expertise together across kind of the public and private sector.
Partners is a word, Adam, I've heard you use before too. What's your response to that? Who have been some successful partners?
I think the whole, something we've all touched on in every single comment that we've made is this really just cannot be one person's job. And I think a huge mistake that the industry has made is like, you're the diversity recruiter, or you're going to fix all our problems. Literally every single person at the company, it has to be within their top 3 priorities, from the VP engineering to the head of sales to the folks on the ground doing ERGs. Like, it has to be every single person's top 3 priority. And the truth is, something that Tarek, my co-CEO, and I always say is, the brand promise has to match the brand experience. And so you can do all these things at the top of the funnel. You can build this great employer brand. But if your brand promise doesn't match your brand experience, all that effort is going to go to waste. And so what I think that the best companies are doing, and what I think you all should be doing, is focus on building a diverse leadership team. Focus on launching an intern, new grad, and apprenticeship program. So we have folks at the earliest level coming in. And then let these 2 groups kind of come together and meet in the middle. And if you're doing that while inviting people to dance, you're going to build an incredible, inclusive, and diverse company.
As long as it's good music. We only have, that's right. We only have a couple minutes left. My last question, I want to open it up to everyone, kind of a speed round situation. So we've been talking a lot about obviously improving the talent pipeline, employee retention, diverse hiring, all of these kinds of buzzwords and keywords that we hear a lot lately. What is something that you think is missing from the conversation? What is something that we are overlooking? Kelly, you look puzzled, but I wanted to start with you. Should I go to someone else?
something we're missing from the conversation. I'll tell you something that I personally, I was venting last night to my husband. We still have so much work to do. Decisions being made at the very top when you don't have the right voices in the room. And I know that like we know that, but it needs to be talked about more. And if I could literally shake these men by their, I'm like, what are you doing, right? And they're like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it. And I'm like, but that's the problem, right? Like that is such a huge, you talk about education, right? That is such a, expectations of leaders have shifted so much. You better know what you're talking about. You better have a point of view. And used to, you could get away with it. Anyway, speed round. Go, somebody else.
Great.
I go for it.
Dana, you're up next.
I think for me, because I work for a government entity, there are sort of political concerns. You have to be careful what you say, when, where, and to whom. But the conversation about the changing demographic of the candidate pool.
Yep.
I work for civil service. The whole benefits lifelong job narrative is not working with this group.
Yep.
They want to have meaningful employment, and one would think that public service is the most meaningful employment. But somehow we need to rebrand ourselves and be open to the conversation that public service has lost some of its nobility in the minds of the candidate pool, and so we need to rebrand ourselves.
And I think you tee this up perfectly. By 2030, 30% of the workforce will be Gen Z. And it is a totally different generation. I'll just leave you with this one stat. 2/3 of the 1,000 Gen Z candidates that we interviewed would reject their dream job if the company had a poor DEIB reputation. That's a big difference. And so I think that's something that we really have to pay attention to.
I think, as I mentioned earlier, paying attention to invisible barriers to opportunity. I think, when algorithms go wrong, we often publicly see it with disinformation or social media, but, questioning the algorithms being used within your own organizations around hiring, just paying more attention to that.
I think what's missing for us is creating more inclusion for our LGBTQ+ community. It's not as easy. If you're Asian, it's obvious. And because we don't force identification in the applicant system, we need to collect more data around gender identity so that we can be more inclusive in the programs we build towards that community.
Great points. Thanks to all of our panelists for your expertise, and thanks for listening.